Good afternoon. My name's Lylanne Musselman, and I'm a board member of Midwest Writers Workshop, and currently I'm their secretary there, and I get the pleasure of interviewing Lara Ehrlich. I won't say it right when I actually have to say it. And Laura is here today to talk about her brand new book of short stories, Animal Wife. And she's the winner of the Red Hen Fiction Award, and there is a picture of it. She's a graduate of University of Chicago, and she lives in Boston with her husband and her daughter. Is there anything that I missed that you would like to tell us about yourself?
Not too much. I think since that bio was put out in public, I've moved to Connecticut. So now I live in
Oh,
Connecticut with my
wow.
husband and daughter, but pretty much everything else is the same.
Still in the New England states.
Exactly. Not
Still
too
a
far.
New Englander. Well, welcome, Laura. I'm going to start by asking you, where did the ideas come from for you to write these stories?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank you for having me too. Thank you so much for
my pleasure.
The interview and for Midwest Writers Workshop, which was, we can talk about this later, but just instrumental in my writing career. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah, no, this is great. So Animal Wife is a collection of 15 short stories. They are about sort of basically about women and girls and the transition from girl to woman to wife to mother to monster. So really all the transformations that girls and women undergo throughout their lives. And a lot of them were based on, let's see, the ideas for them come from different places. The early stories in the book really were coming from a place where I was looking backward at my childhood and my youth with a sense of nostalgia. So this sort of strange attempt to recapture childhood, which of course you can't do, even if you move back to Connecticut, which I did, which is my hometown. You can't move back to your childhood. So really the first couple stories are about girls really at that threshold between youth and adulthood. And then as the book progresses, it really follows my own trajectory of my interests as a writer. So you find the middle stories are more about women transitioning from girlhood to womanhood and from womanhood to wifehood, and the fears and anxieties that accompany those transitions. And then the latter half is about mothers, and you get sort of worst case scenarios drawn from my own fears and anxieties around motherhood as I embarked on that journey. So yeah, so that's the basic sort of outline of the book.
So when you were, thinking about compiling a book, did that come to you originally, or was it that you just started seeing threads going together and like, oh, well, I think I might have something here that I can compile? Or how did the concept for the book come about?
Yeah, the latter way. So I started writing. So I've told this before, but the first book, or the first story in the book, started as a young adult novel. The title story, Animal Wife, it's about a girl whose mother disappears, and then the girl undergoes a quest to find her. And it began as a novel, and I wrote hundreds of pages thinking it was a novel, and it turned out that really it should have been a short story. So that kicked off this collection. And as I wrote stories, again, the stories about youth and that threshold between young adulthood and adulthood, that's where I thought the collection was going, was really about that period of time very specifically. And my interest moved away from that, and it became broader, I think, which is a good thing, that it became more encompassing.
Well, that's interesting, and I think it's good for other writers to hear that, you're got your mindset on a novel, and you've got all these hundreds of pages, and then you think, oh, what am I doing? And then look how fruitful that's become for you. So that's a nice way to look at being able to do this. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I think that's very inspiring for writers. So, did you do a lot of research for this book, or did it all just come out of your imagination? Was there anything that you had to set about doing some research on that you didn't know about?
I would say largely it's from the imagination, but there were certainly things, I wouldn't call it research so much as interests that I had amassed through a lifetime. So I was very, very interested in folklore and fairy tales. And I've taken, in college, I took a lot of courses in folklore, and you can see that coming through the book, but I didn't necessarily go back and need to research it. It was already there in my brain. There were little things that I researched. The animal wife, or the swan maiden story, I read a number of variations of that one, just to refresh myself, but not so much to draw from it. And then as far as actual real solid research, I did do scientific research for a couple of the stories. The Vanishing Point, about a girl, or a woman who builds a biomechanical deer suit and lives in the woods behind her childhood home. I researched biomechanics and talked to professors at MIT, and really, and research deer and and forestry and things like that. So that was the
Well,
more sort of research heavy story.
that's pretty interesting,
Yeah.
interesting stuff. Well, so myself, I've always heard that short stories aren't that easy to get published. So how did that come about? Was it something that you've spent a lot of time um, doing once you got this collection together, or did it just kind of happen overnight, or what's your experience?
Well, I published almost all of the stories in literary magazines along the way, always with an eye toward a collection. So, and yes, it is hard to place short stories. I mean, some of them took more than a year to find a home. Um, Once I started placing them, I think it became a little easier. But it definitely has always been a struggle to place them, because editors at literary magazines, as you know, and probably the viewers know, um, they are just overwhelmed or inundated with manuscripts. So it takes a while. And then as far as a collection of short stories is concerned, even once they've been published in the literary magazines, it's a hard sell to publish a book of short stories. So I submitted it to agents, to directly to small presses, and to contests all at the same time. And a number of agents got back to me and they said, "Oh, we love this. Come back when you have a novel." Because it's easier to sell a two-book deal with a novel and a short story collection. A short story collection on its own by a debut author is difficult. So what ended up happening was that it won the Red Headed Press Fiction Award, as you said, and then I could go back to what sort of my dream agent and say, here, it's now been accepted for publication, and she was therefore ready to make that leap with me and work with me, and it's being published that way. So it's kind of I don't want to say a reverse or backdoor way into publishing, but I think everyone has their own path, especially with short stories.
So you had a dream agent. How did you acquire that agent? Was it a lot of query letters, or how did you come about finding this person? And I take it your dream agent actually accepted it once it won the award.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, agenting is another thing, especially that I learned about through the Midwest Writers Workshop. But I so before this collection, I'd actually written a novel. It was a young adult novel that I had been working on when I attended the conference back in, I don't even know when that was, the early 2000s maybe. And I sent out so many query letters for that book, and I worked with a dream agent for that book, and it didn't sell. And that was heartbreaking at the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, with perseverance and stories that are maybe helpful to aspiring authors, I still believe in that book, but Animal Wife is definitely the one I'm glad I came out with, that it's my debut book. It resonates more deeply, I think, with with the type of work I want to be doing than the other book did. But back to the agents. So yes, I queried hundreds of agents for that book, and ended up working with a great one. She left the business to go back to teaching, which was hard, but in a way good, because then I wasn't sort of feeling bound to that genre, and I
Yeah.
just took a step back, started publishing the short stories. And then the next time when I had this collection, I really didn't query that many agents, because I knew what I wanted to do at that point, and I knew which I had a more strategy involved in the path I wanted to take.
And so was your agent the one that sent it to Red Hen Press, or are you the one that found that?
Yeah, I was the one that found that. I didn't have an agent at the time. Um,
That's
yeah,
right, because you got to
I was
send it to
sending
your
it out.
dream
Yep.
agent.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was some freedom in that, though, sending um, a book on my own to presses and agents and contests, because when you have an agent, they're the intermediary, and that's wonderful in some regards, and in other regards you're waiting to hear from editors through that middle person. So
Yeah.
there was some
Yeah.
freedom in doing it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy for you that it worked
Yeah,
out,
it did.
because, to win an award like that, just like you say, there's like thousands of,
Mhm.
entries into everything,
Sure.
and so, that means that it was really eye-catching
Mm.
for it to win an award. So
Yeah,
congratulations on that.
thank you.
So, when you were putting together the manuscript to send out as short stories, how did you go about? I know the Animal Wife is the very first one, because I actually have your book,
Hmm.
and so I've been reading it when I can, because I teach some classes and do my own thing and stuff. But I was interested in how the stories, like you were saying, they have the beginning, the younger girl, the middle, and then the more womanhood towards the end. So did you set out to do that kind of in that chronological order, or did you just happen to see other themes that ran through those stories that you thought, oh, this is the way that I'm going to order this? Because that's,
Yeah, it
it's kind of like chapters with the novel, I guess, but
mhm.
it would be different with short
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, I was definitely thoughtful about putting the order together, and it was not the order in which I wrote the stories. When when the theme finally became clear to me, then I had a lot of work to do with ordering the stories so that they spoke to each other, and so that they made sense in the order that I had placed them, so that there's a progression not only of the milestones in a woman's life, as we said, but in some of the fantastical elements, because it is most of the stories are, I hesitate to say like magical realist, but they have elements of the uncanny in them. So I wanted to be sure that uncanniness felt more and more increasingly dangerous as the stories progressed. There were a lot of considerations, and I shuffled things around to see how they felt against one another and how one flowed into the next. So yeah, so a lot of thought went into that.
Yeah. So it's not just like, well, I wrote this and now this comes next and this
No,
comes
no, no.
next. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, and then when looking at them all together too, after most of them had been published, I changed some things within them to make sure that they all worked together. One of them needed to be a little more uncanny than it was to fit into the collection. One that I originally had in the collection, when Red Hen Press awarded the book with the prize, I removed it because on further um, reflection, it just didn't quite work as well as I wanted it to. So there was a lot of adjustment.
That's interesting. So
Yeah.
is that one that will, maybe start another book, or is it one that's already been published, or?
I'm trying to remember. I think there were two of them that I removed. One was a very short story. It was sort of a Lydia Davis type. It was two sentences, and it was originally the first two sentences of the story Animal Wife, and then they weren't necessary in that story, but they spoke um, really well as its own little piece. But the only place it could be was really at the beginning, and with the never remember if it's the epilogue or the prologue, the quotes at the beginning. It just kind of felt like another quote as opposed to its own story. So I ended up removing it and bookending the story with the two Animal Wife pieces. And originally, I think Animal Wife was not the first story in the collection, and I moved it up front.
It's an interesting opening. And I must say that, your writing is very I'm a poet myself, and so it's very poetic. It's very image based. I enjoyed reading those stories because they were so poetic.
Oh, thank you.
So I give you a lot of kudos for that.
Thank you.
So, we're talking about revision, which is something I talk about with my students all the time with writing, which a lot of people dread. I find that it's kind of the fun part of writing because that's when you get in and play
Yeah.
and stuff. And so, and thinking about that, do you have readers that you have do you workshop pieces? Do you have trusted readers that you get together, or do you just kind of do it on your own, which is kind of hard for any writers to do, I think.
I think so too. I mean, maybe there are people who can sort of write in a vacuum and then publish what they create, but I don't know anybody who does that. And I definitely don't do that. Yes, I have trusted readers. I've come to trust myself more than I did with that original book, I would say. That book, I had many, many rounds of readers. And I think I needed that at the time to help me figure out how to write a story. And the more I wrote and the more I practiced, the more I trusted my own instincts. And then I have a few trusted people who are very different kinds of readers. So I'll give
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing, I think, and it helps to help you go deeper into what the story should be, I think, rather than listening to all of these different people's points of view and advice, which is well-intentioned but sometimes harmful, I think. So I have a handful of people who I trust to be honest and who are sometimes not right. And I'm confident enough now, I think, to know when they're not right, and I can say thank you for that advice, but I'm not going to follow it.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Did you find some of these readers from your college days, or is it just people that you found through like writing conferences or, like Midwest
Yeah.
Writers or something? Sometimes people make connections
Oh
there.
yeah. Yeah, all different ways. I definitely at Midwest Writers, that was maybe one of that, if not my first writing group, it was very much one of the earliest. And there were two women I met there who I had not met, who I didn't know in advance, and we became very good friends. And we were all three in Chicago, so we would meet every week or every other week and workshop our book. And all three of us now are published writers. One of whom is an incredibly well-known and successful writer. So that was interesting to see her she was the first one to be published, and to watch her go through the publishing gauntlet and all of that. But yeah, so Midwest Writers, other conferences, some school friends. My husband is always one of my first readers. He works at a bookstore. He's a great writer himself, so he has
That's
he has a
good to
great
have.
instinct. Yeah,
Someone in-house.
definitely. Yeah. But I'm always looking for people I trust with their opinions. So
Yeah, I also think that there's probably such a thing as having too many
I think
eyes
so
too,
too. Mm-hmm.
and so like you said, you've kind of narrowed it down to you've got the certain people where maybe with that first novel, maybe there were so many people telling you so many different things that it can
Mm-hmm.
become overwhelming. And It's
Yeah.
just like, what am I going to
Yeah.
do?
I think so. Yeah, and I think it's good to have people who read in different ways. I and the readers who you know them well enough that you know how they read. So my husband often will circle a passage and say like, "This is amazing," and then another friend of mine who reads very differently will circle it and say, "You can cut this." So then it's so you get differing opinions and you realize just how differently people read, and then you need to parse it for yourself
I
and
was going to
figure out.
say that's when you have to rely on yourself of
Right,
which one to trust or what you really feel like is the best for you to keep in there.
right,
Because
right.
that is interesting. We can't please everybody, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, but if you only have people who read and write like you and they all say the same things, then I, I don't know if that necessarily helps either. So it's a fine line between having too many people of disparate opinions and too few people who all agree with each other.
So, you have a beautiful cover and a wonderful title. I mean, it's very catchy because it's like, okay, what's this about?
Mhm.
So I want to know, did you get to choose the title, like, or was there something else within the collection that, maybe your agent or, the publisher was like, oh, we think that. And then with I love that picture on the
Yeah.
cover. Did you get to choose that, or was that something they did? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the title was mine, so it's been Animal Wife all the way through.
Nice.
Which, yeah,
Some
no, I
people don't have that luxury.
exactly, yeah, and that might be something about working with a small press. I'm not sure, but I do feel very lucky that I got to keep my title and that it is evocative of what the stories are. So I think sometimes the marketing team can get involved and change the title so it appeals more toward readers or but yeah, but I'm really happy with the title. The cover, which I'll hold up again. So yeah, Red Hen designed this cover. Specifically a woman called Caitlin Sachs, who works, I don't believe she's an in-house designer with them, but she's worked with Red Hen for many years. And she came up with that. I had some thoughts. I sent Red Hen some covers that I really love and covers I really don't love, and described the stories in a way that I hoped would resonate with a designer, in that they exist in the real world, but with an edge of uncanny and ferocity and danger. And she came up with this cover that was better than anything I could have chosen. So,
I know, and then the background color, with it
oh
being
yeah,
pink and stuff.
hmm
I mean, it's just very eye-catching.
yes, yeah. I'm just thrilled with it. I love it.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
should be.
yeah.
So, do you have a lot of marketing that you need to do with it, or is the publisher going to be doing most of that? Because the book came out September 8th, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead and answer my question because then I thought of something else just as I said that.
Yeah. So, I think whether you're published by a small press or a big house, the onus really is a lot more on the author these days. I mean, you know that to do
Yeah.
your own marketing and heavy lifting. There is, of course, a publicity person or a team at presses, but they deal with so many different books. And we have a great publicity manager at Red Hen who gave us sort of all the fall authors a little course on, or a tutorial on what we could be doing and what the timeline could be for reaching out to reviewers and bookstores. But most of the marketing and heavy lifting was on me. Um, and I would say luckily, luckily, I'm a director of marketing for an arts organization. So
Ah,
yeah, so I have that experience to draw from.
so that's not an ominous thought for you to.
No, no, it's been interesting, I would say, because my expertise is to market and promote artists, other artists and authors and playwrights and so on.
Yeah.
And to do it for myself feels like I know how to do it, but it does not feel comfortable to be promoting myself. I'd rather promote other people. But yeah, it's been a lot of hard work.
Well, what came to me just as I was asking that is like, so it came out September 8th, and, we're in the middle of the pandemic and all that stuff. And
Hmm.
so generally when you get a book launch, you get to go out and do all these readings and have so much fun doing that. So have you been pretty much, relished to Zoom, or are you getting to do any readings, or how are you setting up some of those types of opportunities for yourself?
Yeah, so it's probably helpful for listeners to know too that when promoting a book, it starts so early. So I actually reached out to many bookstores before the pandemic happened, back in the winter probably, and set up all of these in-person events. And when when the pandemic happened, I went back to all of them and said, can we do this virtually? And some of them, unfortunately, and understandably, just were totally underwater and didn't have that capacity, which was disappointing. But on the other hand, the Zoom format has allowed me to travel much further than I could otherwise. So I'm getting to talk to you.
Yeah.
I'll be doing a conversation tomorrow night at Booklight or Skylight Books in LA with Amber Sparks, and
Cool.
yeah, and getting to talk to people, other authors too, who I wouldn't be able to be paired with if it were in person. So that's been a real benefit. But yes, it is disappointing not to be in person, particularly for the launch party. Um, I set up a
Yeah.
lot of community partnerships. So we had a special cocktail and a musician and all of these great things that happened over Crowdcast, a virtual platform, and it felt very celebratory. But then the party ended and I closed the computer, I was in this little office in my house, and my whole family, because my parents live 15 minutes away, my husband took my 4-year-old to their house so I'd have um, the space here. And I was all by myself in my house with my special cocktail, and I was just like, oh. So that part is a little sad.
Yeah, that is sad.
Yeah,
That's one of the sad things is to miss opportunities like that.
yeah,
Um, but I know what you're talking about. It's just like, it was hard to make the concept of the Midwest Writers Conference this past summer to
yeah,
be online. It's like everybody wants to be in person because you meet everybody, you get to talk, and some of the nicest networking and friendships grow when you're intermingling with the other people there at the
yeah,
conference. And something that happened, having it by Zoom, we had people from Idaho and California and different
yeah.
places
Mhm.
that attended that probably wouldn't have come to Muncie for one of the conferences. Um, so it did kind of open that up, and it kind of builds a little bit of it's a different community,
Mhm.
but you don't lose a lot of things that you think you're going to lose. You gain some,
Yeah,
but there is that intimacy of, having person to person contact that means so much to all of us. Um,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know, so um, speaking of Midwest writers, so you were going to tell us a little bit about your
yeah,
experience um,
yeah.
with it. You said you've met, some good friends and some good
Mhm.
writers there, and, you started querying. So,
Mhm.
anything you would like to say about the Midwest writers, we appreciate.
Of course, yeah. So as I said, it was instrumental in getting me where I am right now, and I think the lessons I still am going to carry forward to the next project and the next stage. I'm trying to recall the when I went to the conference. I think it was 2004 or 2005. I had just recently graduated from graduate school at the University of Chicago, um, and was working my first full-time job. I think I was newly married. I should probably know what year I got married in, but um, yes, I was newly married, um, and really struggling to balance all of these new responsibilities, a new job, a new husband, a new, you know, apartment, just all of that kind of stuff. And to really commit to writing in a way that I had always wanted to commit to it. And I had started a lot of novels, probably like a lot of people listening, through the years, and a lot of stories. And I was working on a play, but none of it really felt um, serious enough, I guess. Like it felt sort of like I was working in isolation and I didn't quite know how to get to whatever was next. And so I told myself that if I wanted to be a writer, I needed to finish the project I was working on. That was that YA novel that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And part of doing that was to build a community around the writing and to get support for like emotional and educational support for doing that.
Mhm.
So I applied to the Midwest Writers, and I think I won a fellowship to attend, which was sort
Nice.
of a
Yeah.
nice, yeah, it was encouraging. And I went, and it was the first writing conference that I think I ever attended. And I stayed there in Muncie in a hotel by myself, which felt very like fancy. And I went to the conference, and I still remember those workshops. I remember the small group. I think there was a small group workshop where you revised like the beginning of the first chapter of a novel. I had a one-on-one with an agent who was just really thoughtful and helped me even just to talk about the book that I was writing in a way that felt like it could be a real thing and not just something on my computer. It felt like she told me it was interesting and that it sounded like it would be a great novel, and to get to call her when I was done with it. And I met those friends who were equally serious about their craft. And I took a round table with a gentleman who I think is still there, who teaches. It was about taxes for writers, and
Yeah.
just the fact that you could you could legally call yourself a writer and write off your expenses made me feel like I was working towards something. And I've been doing that ever since, filling out whichever form that is in the taxes. So it made me feel like writing was a more tangible um, profession, and something that I was working toward um, within an industry and a career, rather than just toiling away by myself at something that didn't feel real, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you had a good experience. And,
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
we, even with the Zoom conferences, we had, our separate little, sections of different types of writing, revising. We
Mm-hmm.
had some just breakouts for, just to chat, just
Right.
writers chatting.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were trying to find that community and stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked. I think that the majority of the people that attended really enjoyed themselves. So that's a good thing. And,
That's great.
and
Yeah.
so, we're in the middle of planning Agent Fest. Well, actually, it's coming up November 20th and 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So we did change that last year, which was my first year on the board, that we have a separate Agent Fest, and then we just have the conference um, for the writing and the
Mm-hmm.
revision and all that stuff. And so we still have sessions, writing sessions with the agents, and they, give their expertise and stuff like that at Agent Fest. But it's also a time that you can pitch, and that's what the
Mm-hmm.
people really like to do. So
Yep.
this is going to be our first time doing it by Zoom. So it'll be interesting.
Oh, well, maybe that'll be helpful to have that distant, because I remember doing the pitches and it felt very scary, although all the agents were very welcoming and very and what's the word, encouraging.
Yeah,
But maybe
that's
the
good.
distance of a screen will be will be
Yeah,
helpful.
maybe when they're in their own homes, they won't feel as
Exactly.
nervous about, doing
Hmm.
that. That's true.
You won't have to worry if your
Yeah.
hands are sweating and when you shake hands and all that kind of stuff. But You know, and I would
Exactly.
say too, to anyone listening who's looking for an agent and goes to pitch sessions, that I did a lot of pitch sessions throughout the years, and what I found helpful about them was just um, meeting people within the industry and hearing about what their interests are, and learning that it's very subjective, and that each agent is just a person who has their own interests, and that your work might not be within their sphere of interest, but it will be interesting to someone else. So that once I kind of realized that, it helped relieve the pressure of those conversations, because I wasn't going into them thinking I want this person to be my agent, because
Right.
you need to connect through the work. um, and you won't know that really until they do read the work, and you talk, and you learn about their style and everything. So the pitch
It's
sessions really are just
just
informational.
that. Yeah, just
Yeah.
quick, over with very quickly and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I think you get so caught up and worried about what you're going to say or if you're going to mess up
Yeah.
that sometimes that can hinder how you handle it. And so then maybe if you don't have yourself so invested in one agent, you go
Mhm.
in there and you're more yourself because it's like, I don't care.
Yeah,
Tell
exactly.
them what I think. And then that's going to be the one that's going to say, hey, I'm really interested. and you
Exactly.
and here you were worried about the other. So I think that's interesting how that works. And
Oh yeah.
you're so right about, I also do visual art, and
Mhm.
it's so subjective
Oh yeah.
out there. It's like, I can get one piece into one juried show and it'll be booted out of another, and then another
Mhm.
one it might win an award. And
Right.
so just it just goes. So over the years I've learned to just chill
Yeah,
and not
exactly.
worry. Just keep, you just keep doing what you do, and
Mhm.
you love it. That's why you do it.
Right.
And then, things are going to happen for you if you stay with it.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
and no, I've never forgotten when I was in grad school. Um, we had a writer that came to talk to us, and I won't mention his name in case he would be embarrassed about it. But um, he's a famous writer, and he came and he attended the Iowa's writers workshop, and he said there were a lot of students in his class that were a lot better than what he felt that he was, and he thought that they would have writing careers, and they just have dropped off into the
Yeah.
ether, but yet here he is risen. And
Mhm.
so that's something that I've always learned too. It's just the tenacity. You just
Oh
keep
yeah.
going with it. You keep submitting, you keep entering shows, and that's what happens. That's how you get
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's so. I think if there's one piece of advice or information that every writer needs to take to heart, it's that, right? Is just that this is an industry just full of failure. It's like 98% failure and 2% success. And then even the success is then hard. Like I said, you get the book, but then you have to market yourself, and you have to write essays to support the book, and you have to do social media for it. And so I think if anybody truly wants to be a writer, they have to want it pretty badly
Exactly. Well,
to,
that's what
yeah.
I was going to say is one of the things that I always thought, oh, once I have a poem published in a good literary magazine, then I'll be fine. Well, then that
Oh
happened,
no.
and then what? So then well, once I have a chapbook published, well, then that happened, and now five, and then it's not like, then what? And so it's like it doesn't really change your life. Like
Hmm.
it's not, it makes you happy, and you ride that high for as long as you can, but then you're back working on new stuff.
Right. Yes.
And so that's what I
Yeah.
want to ask you about. So,
Yeah.
you've just got this book out. Are you working on short stories? You're working on a novel, or what are you working on now?
Yeah, I am working on a novel. I have I'm working on a second draft of a book. And that's something else I think is important for me to say, and for writers to hear too, is that um, it's very hard when you finish a project and you put it out there in the world and you're waiting for something to happen. And I definitely obsess over it, and like, what's happened, like, who's reading it, is, am I going to get a call or the email from an agent or all, like, but really it was so important to start working on the next thing. So I did. I started working on this novel, I think the day, probably even early, probably even before I started sending the collection out. I was working on a new novel, and yeah, and it's not because I feel the pressure of putting things out in the world. It's that just the need to keep working and to
Yeah.
keep practicing, and yeah.
So is it a fantasy, another fantasy, or is it a YA, or what are you seeing it as? Or
Yeah. I would say it's literary fiction. It is in the vein of these stories in that it takes place in our world, but it has elements of the uncanny, and it's definitely kind of strange, weird. It is a woman-centric book, um, and I would say, like, if people were to read The Vanishing Point about the woman who transforms into a deer, that's probably the the closest that the closest story to what I'm working on now. It was the last one I wrote in the
yeah,
collection, and it's sort of the launching pad to the next project.
yeah. And the
Yeah.
one that you did the research on.
Yes. Yes, I'm doing research for the novel. Yep.
Very good.
Yep.
Well, can you tell us where all your book is available so that people that are interested in Animal Wife and learning more about you, besides this, little Zoom chat, they can
Yeah.
find?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. It is available in bookstores now, so I always encourage people to buy from their independent bookstores. If you want to buy online, a lot of the bookstores do have online purchasing available, and then Red Hen Press, you can buy directly from them. And I wish I remember the name. Is it Book? What is the new online book purchasing platform? Is it?
I,
I'll look it up because I think it's important
I
to
was
give
going to
them a shout
say,
out.
I know, I've heard it, and I don't
It's
want to say the wrong thing.
no, here, let me look at it because it is an alternative to the other one that we all know and
Yeah,
often use, Bookshop. It's a
yeah,
bookshop.
yeah, that's so easy.
Yes.
I was thinking about that, but I didn't want to say it if that wasn't the right
Yes.
one. So,
Yes. Bookshop. And of course you can buy it at the other online purchasing platform that I
all
will not
right.
name. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this interview
Oh,
and letting me, pick your mind about your writing and your stories. And
oh
it's been
yeah.
very informative for me and for others, I hope.
No, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you,
me.
Laura.
Yeah, I'm such a
And
fan of Midwest writers. I encourage everyone now, I would say, like before in the Midwest, but now you can go from anywhere. So I would encourage anybody from anywhere.
right. And that's
Yep.
one of the things we're talking about is even when we can start meeting back in person, that maybe we do need to keep a Zoom or some
Yeah,
kind of online component so we can have a outreach out a little bit
definitely.
farther.
Well, I'll
Well,
be there
thank
from
you.
Connecticut. So
Very
thank you.
good.
Yeah,
I'll look forward. Now I know you
yeah.
from our little other interview and now from this. So this is
Yeah,
good.
it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Laura.
And thank you.
Well, I've uh, I'm trying to